that even though God's people live in a confronting and confusing world, the spiritual reality is what? God is always at work right around them. Next week we'll get into the invitation, I guess, of Moses to come join my work, come join my rescue mission that makes a difference in the world. But I think there's a more foundational part of this to be played out, and I could probably preach on this for about a year. I'm going to try to do it in one Sunday, but God starts not by just giving Moses a job to do. Well before that, he starts giving Moses and developing in Moses, I think, a depth of relationship that is going to support and, dare I say, withstand the calling that he has in mind. I forgot to say last week, thank you to my daughter EJ, Ellie. She's in kids' church, but she did an awesome job with this artwork, by the way, and that was her doing, not mine. I'm not that clever. And if you missed last week, by the way, make sure you go back and watch it. It's on our YouTube page, and we'll try to get up those. Try to get those sermons up every week as quick as we can. But just two stories, I guess, to try to explain and put this into any sort of coherent sense, and probably more why does it matter? You'll notice the study this week begins with a little simple illustration, and the illustration is how big is the Nullarbor Plain in southern Australia? The simple Google answer, the simple Google measurement is it's about 200,000 square kilometres of semi-arid, almost flat, largely treeless, mostly empty desert. Okay? Edward Eyre and others, I think, walked it at 1841, but they would be able to tell you how big it is. But they would also be able to tell you how hot it is. They'd also be able to tell you how unforgiving the sun is. They'd be able to tell you the lack of trees. They'd be able to I guess, put into words the lack of water. There is a vast difference between the Google theoretical answer and the lived experience of what it looks like. Okay? Second story. I guess my point there is that there's a lived experience where you know something because you've experienced it, if you know what I mean. The second story. On holidays, we spent a lot of time at the beach, as you would appreciate, and there's a picture on the screen of my son Ryan with one of his cousins. He was keen to catch these little waves and get propelled along and enjoy the ride, in a sense, right? But notice the water he's jumping into is not the deepest. There was a couple of times where he jumped to catch a wave, only to find that the wave that he just turned around to was there's almost not any water there. He did jump a couple of times and sort of land on his chest and just stop. Okay. These couple of stories do work together, I promise. You can have all the knowledge and background information about God that you like. But before God can use Moses to accomplish what God's got in mind, Moses needs to have a real lived experience, and dare I say it, a real living relationship with this God that goes beyond him just knowing something. Okay? And there is a great danger, I think, in somebody being thrown, somebody throwing themselves in front of a wave, hoping that they're going to catch and maybe join God's movement. But if they do it without the relationship to sustain what they're doing, they're going to hit a sandbank and they're going to stop. They're not going to go any further. God doesn't come to Moses one day and just say, I've got a job for you to do. Here's the job, go and do it. I'll be over here at the fire sunning myself and cooking marshmallows and having a cuppa. You come back when you finish the job and you tell me. That's not what God does. God says to him, I will be with you. It's you and me together that are going to get this job done. It is not you by yourself. Okay? We're in this together. We're joined at the hip. It's going to take as long as it takes, and it's going to be a partnership. And I guess the point is that before is just going to hand out any jobs to anybody or send a calling to somebody or whatever the story might be, he's trying to grow and develop Moses into this daily, growing, abiding relationship with him that is going to sustain what he's trying to do. And this is what he invites all of us without reservation and without question into with him. God is on a relationship building agenda. He's not just in the job of just trying to give you a job. Do you know what I mean? I'm going to take that murmur and hope that was a yes. First thing I want to say about this God-given relationship agenda is this: don't hurry the isolation. In the broad brushstrokes, if you look at Moses' life, we know that his parents bring him up. We know that they probably build a good foundation in terms of faith and a knowledge of God. We know that eventually they have to return him to life in the palace, and he grows up, probably spending the vast majority of the first 40 years of his life in the best of the Egyptian culture. I suspect that he probably grows up with a chip on his shoulder, though. Because even though he lives in the palace and he belongs in the palace, the reality is he doesn't belong in the palace. Okay, because I don't know if it's appearance, I don't know what it is, but I think he would know and sense that the people outside who are slaves are his, and that he doesn't really belong here at all. We'll probably get into next week his efforts to fix the problem himself a little bit, but essentially he kills somebody in his own effort to try to fix the problem. He essentially has to run to the end of the earth. In those days, he just finds something to do. Gets married. Most scholars believe he spends the next 40 years of his life basically unlearning everything that he's learnt in the first 40 years. And probably wandering around with a whole bunch of sheep, maybe just trying to forget his mistakes. Maybe it's incredibly annoying for him. I don't know. He's probably somebody deeply frustrated that he had to go through that. He's probably somebody who says, I wanted to move forward with God. I wanted God to use me. I wanted God to actually accomplish something in my life. I don't have forever, so God, why not today? Okay? But here's the point. God has a far deeper work he's trying to accomplish in Moses. And he is in the perfect place to redeem and fix it, isn't he? I made a comment last week that God can only use somebody to lead his people to freedom who's come to the end of themselves. And sometimes it takes 40 years and a lot of sweat and a lot of difficult times before God can use you. I just want to... God's got to get past the superficial. God's got to get past the carefully constructed outlook. God's got to get past your wardrobe and the other sort of things that maybe become really, really important in your life before he can accomplish his calling. And I sense that some of you... I sense very clearly today that some of you in the future hold a very specific and strong calling that God is trying to accomplish in your life. My word of warning is, don't rush the time in isolation where God needs to do his work in you. Because it's where God does his best work. It's where God does his best work. And I share that because I think our world somehow tries to convince us that stopping long enough to listen to God doesn't make sense in our world today. It just doesn't. Okay? But it's only the surface appearance that matters. It's only what you put on Facebook that really counts, right? Three, if you rush to achieve something, you'll miss your calling. That is what the world says. It's today or never. And I want to just tell you that I think as God's people, the message for us is we've just got to run at a different pace than everybody else. I'm coming more and more to the point where God has to empty us of everything else before he can truly use us. And I can't emphasize enough that time of daily rhythm, time, relationship with him. I can't emphasize enough the importance of authentic, loving Christian community. A place where you learn and you serve and you give and you make mistakes and you get encouraged by godly people. Those are some of the times that are most frustrating, but they're also some of the times looking back that are most rewarding, because God's trying to empty you of all the stuff he's got to empty you of before he can truly use you. The message is not that we rush ahead out of the isolation and out of the uncomfortableness and out of the emptiness and out of the pain to try to join our world and become productive. The job is you let God do what he needs to. And if that takes 80 years before you can be used of God, well, that's the journey. Don't rush the time in isolation. I don't know why that matters so much this morning, but God clearly has it. He clearly has it to be said for somebody. Maybe it's me. A few things that relationship with God is not. And please forgive my poor creative attempts to try to force all of these little things into words that begins with C, and because the reality is that they don't. All right, but relationship is not consignment or assignment, but closeness. Okay, Moses is not trying to he's not just being forced to, he's not just being given a job that he can accomplish in his own time, at his own pace, with his own resources, and do it at an arm's length from God. God's invitation is that this is you and me together. It's you move at my pace, not at your own. You don't design the details of this, you just walk with me through it. Okay, what this is that relationship with God is about closeness. How's the closeness between you and him this morning? Second, relationship is not cheerleading, but compliance. I think the better word maybe for compliance is just surrender. Some Christians like cheerleading, where they get a portion of the attention, they get a portion of the rewards, that they get a portion of the sense of achievement or the glory that sort of comes with it. But what God's trying to build in Moses is somebody who reflects the glory elsewhere, where there's nothing of it in him. He's not trying to become a great leader so he can prove to himself that he's made it. That's not God's calling. And I can't help but notice and maybe read into something a little bit too much. Verse 4 says, when God saw Moses, he called from within the burning bush. What's Moses' reply? Here I am. I can't help but notice that maybe unwritten in that reply is there's nothing else in me. I'm empty. I'm done. here I am, and here I am available to you. Can I suggest that that's a great starting point to be used of God? I've got nothing else. I've got no pretense. I've got no other thing I'm trying to build. It's just me, and here I am. 3, relationship is not about convenience, it's about conversation. You don't get to run ahead, live your best life, run back to him when you need something. I guess some of us, I guess my fear is that we have reduced our relationship with God or our prayer life to something that maybe is transactional, something that maybe is convenient. When it suits us, we'll just live a life over here, and we'll come back to God when we need to. And it was never meant to be like that. It was meant to be constant, ongoing conversation. Anywhere I am, wherever I am. And the third, I think the last thing is not consuming but conducting. One of the things you can do at a burning bush, I'm fairly sure, is you can stand there and enjoy it. You can probably stand there. You know how fire is one of those places that you can stand there and stare at it like for about an hour, and you just sit there and go, whoa, and it's like this really, really quiet sort of moment and reflective moment and everything else. It's the picture of a consumer, isn't it? It's the picture of, I will just stand here and just do nothing. I'll just sit here and watch the world go by and not. When God says, I will be with you, I think what he's saying is that relationship-wise, he's intending, or he wants Moses to be a conductor. I think this is an area that Moses actually grows into, because I can't help but notice Exodus 33. Who knows how many years later on? Moses said, if you don't personally go with us, don't make us leave this place. For your presence amongst us sets your people and us and me apart from all the other people on the earth. What he's saying is don't become a consumer, become a conductor of what God's trying to do in the world. Empty yourself so that he can fill you with his presence, and so you can work from that. That's what a relationship is about. Why does this all matter? Let me just say that relationship is a path to spiritual maturity. It is the path to spiritual maturity. And often when relationship with God is not strong in a church, the church is fraught with danger. And the reason I share this is because I've seen it too much, and I don't want to see it here. Maybe that's the reason for the heaviness. I remember one of my previous churches I was part of some years ago, where we needed to have some really mature and common sense discussions about the future, and that was going to take change. It was going to take a change of direction. It was going to take a change of priorities. And I think in one of those meetings, one of the reasons I don't like meetings, by the way, believe it or not, one of the really influential, awesome, long-term, servant-hearted people in a prominent position in the church got up. He very publicly and abruptly had his say about what he thought about the whole thing. He publicly resigned, and he publicly walked out. You know those sort of things, right? I don't know if you know those sort of things, but that's unfortunately the reality sometimes of the church. The pastor at the time, I met with him later that week, and one of the questions the pastor asked him was not, what the hell were you thinking? It was, how's your relationship with God? And the guy who had been in a senior leadership position in the church for a long, long time confessed that it hadn't been a relationship for a long, long time. It had been something outwardly visible to other people, but it was stale. There was no life. There was no vitality. There was no power. There was no lived, transformed experience, which basically means there's no maturity. And it reminds me a little bit of the story of the prodigal son. You've got one where only one of those sons truly experiences and knows without a doubt the shadow and depth of his father's love. You've got one son who wished his father dead, who took his God-given inheritance in life and made his own plan. And the Bible says that, believe it or not, all of us unknowingly, knowingly have treated God like that. The good news is that the son came to the end of himself. He came home, and he came to experience the relational depth of a father's undeserved love and forgiveness. Then you had the other son whose relationship was based on what he could achieve for his father, and was done, I think on some level out of a religious sense or maybe a sense of loyalty, and not a bad thing, but a heart that used to be sensitive to his father's love, a heart that had a long time received his father's love, had over a long time without practice and without investment turned hard. I have a friend of mine in Billawheeler who we have heart jokes. He had some heart problems many years ago, and he has to go for a heart checkup once every couple of months. And we have a chat here and there. He always tells me the same joke. The doctor still tells me that I'm hard-hearted, and he adds a couple of other colourful words on the end of that. In his case, the fact that he's hard-hearted is a good thing. The point is, for God's people, it is something that without work and without investment on our part can easily turn into bitterness and judgmentalism and stubbornness instead of sensitivity and love towards God. What I'm not suggesting anything crazy. All right, I think maybe the word experience has become a bit overdone in churches, and I'm not saying I'm not promoting anything crazy or emotional. Everyone okay? But I think ultimately the answer to the question about what sort of people we want to be is authentic, genuine, heartfelt people who come to know and come to sense the depth of God's grace for us, and then happily respond in faith, and happily respond in sensitivity, and happily invest time and effort to come to know Him more. Sometimes people hit a wall. Sometimes people hit a sandbank. Sometimes you get stuck on the sandbank and you can't do anything until God picks you up the next time. You know, God is not after people who are perfect. He's after people who are never satisfied that they know enough about Him, but just want to know Him more. The danger is the more you do for God in this life, and I can tell you this from first-hand experience, the more you do for God, the greater risk you have to depart from that relationship out of a sense of loyalty. And that's dangerous, dangerous territory. God's words to Moses are the same words He would say to you this morning. I will be with you. You see, I don't think that God wants you to live. I don't think God wants the last time you knew Him to be 1980 something. He longs to come and live and work and know and come into your life today. He longs to come in today and not 30 years ago. You can't work from that. You've got to let him in. And the question I've got to ask you this morning is, will you let him in for the first time? Or will you let him back in if he's never been there for a long time? If it's honestly been a long time since he's been there, let him back in. I love what Wesley said years ago. My fear is not that these people we call Methodists will eventually cease to exist. And this is not a Wesleyan thing. Everyone okay? My fear is that we will become content to be people who live without the fire and the supernatural power of God that makes us great. I'm not pointing fingers at any churches today, but I will not pastor a church that does not operate in fully fledged relationship and faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. And I will not operate a church that is content to live where we are when God's calling us further. The starting point to be those sort of people who invest in that relationship with God, it is the foundation of everything else. The question this morning is how is your relationship? I want to do something a little bit differently today. We have messed up this morning's thing a little bit. Our world runs at something called fever pitch, and that's going to be our series in term 2. I think our world tries to divert us away in a range of directions and away, a range of things, away from building a depth of relationship with God. And we're going to finish this morning with a song called Goodness of God, where we can celebrate what God's done in our lives. But for 5 minutes before that, we're just going to sit here and rebuild that relationship. We're going to have 5 minutes of quiet in a church. There'll be some a little bit of music on in the background. It'll be pretty low, so you're not going to be able to sing along or anything else. But it's going to be really uncomfortable, because people don't stop these days, do they? Okay? 5 minutes of quiet does not make sense for anybody. There's going to be a timer up on the screen for anybody who's really, really struggling. Like time does not just, like, the world doesn't just come to an end. Okay? But for 5 minutes, I just want you to honestly stop, to pray, to ponder, to bring your life before him, to allow him to speak and allow him to, dare I say, rebuild something that's been broken for a long time. We'll leave space after church to pray for anybody who needs it. Can I ask that you leave praying with somebody else during this time? Just make this you and him. If you're still asking God questions about who he is, ask him the questions. That's okay. But just spend this time investing. I hope that in a church our size that we never get so tied up with the doing stuff every 4 minutes that we maybe fail to build that relationship sometimes that maybe has been struggling for a long time. The only exception to this, the only exception to no conversation is if maybe you're in a position this morning where you've never let him in. If you've never responded to Jesus this morning and you need to do that, and maybe start building that relationship from somewhere, I would be more than happy to sit and talk and pray with you right now. 5 minutes. The world will not end. The world is not going to fall apart. But take this time just to invest in your relationship with him, because it's what happens in this moment that is going to sustain what God's calling us to do for the years to come. Not just this minute, but for a lot more minutes.